This is an overview of chapter one. Chapter one is an introductory chapter, so you'll be introduced to the question, what is corrections? Corrections is about punishment, it's about treatment, it's about supervision and management of people who have committed crimes, for sure. But you'll also delve into some of the earliest uh, correctional systems in the world. One area that you'll be introduced to is the two different views of crime, the classical view and the positivist view. The classical view is largely attributed to a man, Cesare Beccaria, who lived in the 17th century. He believed that humans have free will, they have rationality, and therefore, when they do bad things, then they are responsible for those bad things. They're responsible for their actions. However, where he differed from the majority of people during his time was that rather than quick retribution, which is how much of the world operated at the time when someone committed a crime, he that people should be punished according to the harm done. Now, some of that punishment could still be harsh. For example, one could say, well, if a thief steals a loaf of bread and their hand is cut off, well, that's punishment fitting the crime. They can't steal with that hand anymore. But he went further and argued that too often, even for relatively minor crimes, people were put to death or tortured. And he argued that there had to be a way to help people learn from their mistakes. The positivist view, on the other hand, is the idea that people do have free will, but they don't always have the ability to control what they do. So, for example, we often think of crimes that are done in the quote, the heat of passion, meaning that sometimes people lose their tempers or they're so depressed or saddened that they may commit a crime that they might not otherwise have committed. So those two views have shaped not only our criminal laws, but also the way we approach the incarceration of people in the United States. And you'll also be introduced to thinking about what is the function of punishment. When we punish somebody because they've committed a crime, what's our goal? Do we want retribution? That is, we want to make them pay for what they've done? Do we want deterrence? Do we want to teach them a lesson so maybe they won't do it again? Do we want to rehabilitate them? Do we want to help them learn how to do things differently so that they can reintegrate into society better? Also, you'll be introduced to the due process model of how to treat crimes and the crime control model of how to treat crimes. The due process model is the one that we typically use here in the United States, although there are some exceptions more recently with some Supreme Court decisions. But the due process model is the idea that a person who is accused of a crime must be treated fairly. They must be allowed, for example, to confront witnesses against him. That was one of Cesare Beccaria's ideas. They must be able to have representation, even if they can't afford it. It's part of Miranda warnings. They have to have access to all the evidence that is going to be used against them so that they can prepare their defense. This is all part of the due process model. We have amendments, these are in the Bill of Rights, Amendments 1 through 10, that also are part of the idea of due process. You can't be made to incriminate yourself, Fifth Amendment. You cannot be subject or should not be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures, Fourth Amendment, etc. The crime control model takes a harsher stance. This is the idea that the good people in society should be protected from the bad people. And so whatever it takes to catch a bad person is what we should do. Cutting them slack because maybe there was an unreasonable search and we found contraband in their home, that shouldn't happen. We should still prosecute them. Of course, we know that under the due process model, the evidence would be thrown out, fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. So those are two competing views. And while we typically use the due process model, as I said, there are times when more recently, the Supreme Court has decided that sometimes the crime control model is more applicable. So as you study chapter 1, I hope that you consider where you fall into these differing views of why we punish, how we punish, what should be our goal in punishment, and think about whether you agree more with the positivist view or the classical view, with the due process view, or the crime control view. Put some thought into that as you're studying this chapter.